answer the basic questions and be confident in your way forward and plug into these resources early and glean. Just be a sponge.
Welcome to Drop and Give Me 20, where you learn keys to entrepreneurial success as Lindsay Germono interviews business owners with military backgrounds on what works and what doesn't. Listen as they focus on the stories, both challenges and wins, that military entrepreneurs have faced in growing their businesses.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Drop and Give Me 20. I am your host, Lindsay Germono. Today I have Jonny Coreson on, and Jonny is a connection that I made through, we connected through LinkedIn, didn't we?
Yeah.
So Jonny and I are focusing today on talking about his experiences as he is actually active duty, also owns a business called Bluejacketeer. So hi, Jonny. How are you?
Hi, Lindsay. Thanks for having me on.
You are welcome. So for the listeners that are here today, let's run through it. Let's hear more about you. Are you Navy?
So I'm active duty Navy. I'm an E6, and I've worked in a few different fields, but I think what's most interesting to me in my 3 years recently has been becoming a career counselor, dealing with folks getting out or wanting to stay in, extend their careers. A lot of impactful moments in a person's life, but seeing a career counselor for either reason is one of them.
So you're a career counselor, but you also own a business. So you're counseling them, and then you're like, yeah, I'm also in my business. I'm doing this. So tell us when you formed Bluejacketeer.
I formed Bluejacketeer actually with a friend that I had online, Alan, my business partner. And he had the groundwork laid back in 2013, and he spent about 2 years finding the product that he wanted to go to market. And I came in kind of late in his development process, right near the end, to add some business value to it. And so we created the business in February of 2016.
And what is it that you guys do?
We provide advancement exam, which is a promotion exam, prep software online. We use a spaced repetition algorithm that leads down into what any of our customers would need to know after digesting thousands of questions.
And then they use this to pass their exam so that they can advance in the military?
Exactly. It's a perfect value proposition. You spend a little bit of money to get a well-made product. You advance in your career, and each month you see a nice return on that.
So the military doesn't do this on their own? I'm sorry, I'm just curious. Like, they don't prepare?
Okay. They do. They have a large group of instructions that a person is supposed to go through and read. And as you can imagine, not a lot of it testable. Some of it is just fluff. It's, an instruction. So what we do is we weed through all that. We have writers that have experience in the advancement exam. And what they do is they try to recall the information that was presented to them, and then they provide us with questions and links to each of the instructions to verify each of the questions.
So you're like the specialists that come in, narrow down all that fluff so that the service member can have a more of a simplified study track.
Exactly, yes.
Awesome. And so let's talk about your career counseling. What kind of folks do you see that come in for your counseling?
Well, I started career counseling in late 2013 and really got into the swing of things after going to one of the schools in 2014. And what I noticed right off the bat was that sailors would come to me and they would have this grand plan for getting out of the military. And I always kind of, listened to their story with a little bit of skepticism and pointed questions and tried to weed out some of the information that they had not thought of yet. And what became pretty clear to me and to them as well is that, the best laid plans of mice and men, right? So what we did is we would go through conversation, and it was guided based on information that I had, and try to really hone in on what a person would actually do when they got out. And so also part of that is showing them what their value is in the military and what financial benefits outside of just their base pay that they receive. And that was also one of the most interesting things that I found in explaining this to people. They understood that they would have to really get out there into the market or start a business that actually was, working and growing from day one if they wanted the same standard of living if they separated.
Yeah, that's a big deal. So we talk a little bit about that in our podcast on the realistic or being realistic, right? So when you are active duty, you've got a promised pay coming in and benefits and all that. And then you go from that to not having a lot of that security and what that does to somebody who wants to pursue entrepreneurship. So how long is it going to be until you can realistically pay yourself? But not only that, make the amount that you have been accustomed to and your family has been accustomed to. It's not just
Sure.
So in your counseling conversations, what kind of advice do you give these folks who say, yeah, I want to go in and I want to get out and I want to open a business?
Well, in fact, that's what led me to take the first steps in my business, or at least in the few that I've started since, is that thought that we need to get to a point where when I separate, when that financial security is over that the military has provided me for so long, I need to step into a financial security that, like you said, provides the same or, slightly higher standard of living that, that I've been expecting here in the military. And I'm enlisted. So there's, everyone knows how much I get paid now, right? And so the advice that I give to anyone who says, hey, you know what, my idea is that I want to get out, I want to start this business. I've got a great business idea. And so in that conversation, my job is to just go research and see what resources I can find for these individuals. And that's what connected me to a lot of these veteran and even sometimes entrepreneur efforts that support active duty as well. And I mean, I have a list of them now, having done it for so long, but I just decided that for myself, I'd into those networks and see what I could get out of them as well.
Yeah, there are a number that I know about. I was just on the National Military Family Association's Facebook Live the other day. In addition to that, there's the military entrepreneur programs through, oh my gosh, I'm like totally going blank. But
Inc. 5000.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm like, I want other stuff. Have you gone to any of that stuff?
Yeah. The first thing I did was the Inc. 5000, and that was just a tremendous experience. And the business I had at that time had a quiz game that I published on iPhones and Android. And at the time, the number one Inc. 5000 fastest growing business in America was Boohoo, who creates the Navi tablet. And out of that event, I got to meet the CEO, shake his hand, had a few drinks with him, and he pointed me in the direction of his business development specialist. And our relationship kicked off from there. And that was one of our best sources of income, was based out of that meeting that I had.
I've heard amazing things about the conference, and it's on my radar to go. I think there's one in October, and that's the one that I want to go to. Is that the Inc. 5000, the one in November or October? I can't remember.
They have two. They have one that's kind of a mini event, and then the other is the 3-day that culminates in the gala.
Right. Okay, cool. So you recommend to these folks that are coming in, they go, I want to get out and I want to open up my own business, to tap into some of these resources that can help support them along that way. Tell us about some of if you knew now what you knew back then on your side, on your business, what kind of advice would you give yourself, 3 years ago?
Well, I think first and foremost, and anyone who says to themselves, I want to start a business, the first thought is, well, let's, create some kind of business plan or elevator speech, just a way to communicate what we want to do. And I hear that a lot now as people ask me or tell me about their business ideas. They have already answered the basic questions. So I think, if I were to tell myself 3 years ago, I would have told myself, just answer the basic questions and be confident in your way forward and plug into these resources early and glean. Just be a sponge. Just absorb it all in, really shape your business based on the advice given to you by people who, don't have to be there. They're just doing this out of their own good free will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So create a business plan. What's next?
Sometimes the next step is secure financing. And I've been lucky enough to bootstrap the business that I created, and then to jump into Bluejacketeer as well was also bootstrapped. So, but again, in finding financing, you really have options. You can plug into some of the veteran communities as well. Street Shares, for one, is a great resource now if you're looking for startup funding.
Cool. I'm going to share that out when we publish the episode. I'll make sure to put those in there. Did you have anything that you did? We were talking about this. You were like, oh my gosh, I could even share some of my goofs, if so to speak. Did you have anything that you wanted to share about those?
Absolutely. And this goes into being active duty. My number one mission right now is to support the Navy, United States Navy. And so I am blessed to be able to do this on the side, to do business on the side, but primarily I'm a United States Navy sailor. So what happened was 3 weeks after I'd launched, pressed play on my app. I was really getting ready to launch this thing and do it right. My CC walked into my office and said, you know what would you say if I told you you're deploying in 3 weeks or 7 months?
Oh my God.
So I understand immediately the ramifications that had on my business. And so I kind of absorbed that first before I understood the impact that it would have, not only on my family, but my career as well. It's just interesting that in my mind, I thought, oh shoot, this is going to ruin my business. And there was another event, as we talk about veteran entrepreneurship. After Patriot Boot Camp, I was pretty much signed up and ready to go to that in April of that year. But, because I was deploying, I could not go.
And there's no way you can, I guess when you're up for a reassignment, but you don't always necessarily know when they're going to call you for a deployment. Jonny, one of the things you mentioned when we were talking last was about this transition and the boots to, what was that?
Boots to business. Yep.
Boots to business. So let's kick that around a little bit, no pun intended, but I'm not familiar with it. So what kind of conversation should we be having about that?
So part of the transition process and an act that was actually signed into place by President Obama some time ago was that all of this transition period should be mandatory. And you'll go through a pre-separation counseling and then also this class. And part of that class is subclass and being offered. It's called Boots to Business in the Navy and in the Marine Corps community sometimes. And it's called something else in other branches as well. But it's a portion of a transition counseling that is solely directed toward those who wish to start businesses when they get out. And one thing that I think about Boots to Business is it's such a great tool, but it's usually the first opportunity that someone has to start thinking about their business. And if you wait till 6 months or 8 months even before you separate to go to a Boots to Business class, you might have already missed an opportunity there. Because when you're thinking about transitioning and getting a business to a point where it's going to support you, your family, or even your team members and employees, you really have to start that, a year, sometimes 2 years in advance. And so going to Boots to Business is not a bad thing. It's definitely an accelerator program, but it shouldn't be the first time that a person is, getting that first step forward in their entrepreneurial efforts.
So don't wait. Do that. The earlier, the better. The sooner, the better.
Right. And you were talking about a secure financial situation when you're in the military. And that's why bootstrapping while being active duty is such a wonderful opportunity, because you know what's going to come in. You know that you can act here and there and then support this business that later is going to support you. So it's an investment that you use, really your government, your pay, your base pay or other allowances to bootstrap a business. And I've actually written a blog on it on pre-veteran in bootstrapping while active duty.
We'll have to share that out when the episode releases so that people can read that. Thank you so much for explaining that process to us. And I want to, before we, end today's podcast episode, I do want to talk a little bit about what if I'm active duty, and you mentioned it too, our first job is to serve our country. What are some types of businesses that we might be able to do as our first job, for active duty members?
One of the hardest things about being active duty and owning a business is that you can't sell to anyone who's of lower rank than you. And there's a pretty black and white line there that you should not be crossed. And so when I think of what types of businesses, I think of businesses that have clientele outside of the Navy environment. Now, I say that, except that right now I have a business that is solely a customer base of sailors. It's really hard for me because I can't tell any sailors about this, So if I were to say what type of business, something that you can grow horizontally just for a little bit, get a foundation, and then once you step out, start those verticals and pump energy and finances and resources into growing your business vertically as well.
Is that a thing among all branches that they can't sell to anyone of a lower rank?
It is.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. But it makes sense. I mean, I can't imagine the type of conflicts that could create. So I want to make sure that people follow you.
Sure. You can connect with us as a business on Facebook if you're interested in kind of what we do and how we do it. And if you want, you can always email me, Jonny@Bluejacketeer.com. And having been a part of some of these veteran entrepreneurship networks, inundated sometimes with emails about wanting to connect and hear stories. So I will respond to an email if one comes across my desk that needs a little bit of assistance.
So, and it's JONNY@Bluejacketeer.com, correct?
That's it. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Well, again, everybody, you heard it from an active duty Navy person that you have to be, I guess, very, very aware of what your plans are if you want to start a business while you are active duty. Jonny, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast today and talking to us. And I also want to thank you for your service. Please reach out to Jonny if you have any questions. Jonny and I have both kind of marry in the same military community. And I do know a number of resources that we mentioned in the podcast episode today, and be more than happy to point you in the right direction. So thank you again for your time today, Jonny.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks for listening to Drop and Give Me 20, brought to you by Germono Advertising Company in Norfolk, Virginia. Please visit our podcast in iTunes, click on subscribe, and leave us a review. Your support goes a long way.
When you subscribe and leave reviews, it helps the guests on our show as well. Jump in and let us know what you think. You can also follow all of our guests on the Drop and Give Me 20 Facebook page. We have Instagram and Twitter. Those handles are Give Me 20 Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Germono, and I appreciate you listening to the show.